YouTube, it's Joanna Delilah. I'm doing a video today about colour theory for makeup artists, specifically for makeup students, and actually more specifically than that, my makeup students who are working from home during lockdown. And so this is a lesson I'd normally do in the classroom. I'll try to keep it in a reasonable length of time, but as I say, it is for college students, so you know, if it's boring, skip on past, don't worry about it. But my students, you have to watch it right to the end. Maybe I'll put a code word in there at some point that you'll have to pick up on, so I can tell whether you've watched it all. No, that's too distracting. Okay, so you will see I've painted on my hand with some grease paints. This is a colour wheel. So colour for makeup artists obviously is one of the most important things to get your head around, and one of the most useful as well. So all colours under the sun in the world come from these three: red, yellow and blue. So in theory, I could make a foundation shade. I can make absolutely any colour out of these three. You need to add in a couple of mixers, so a black and a white as well, of course, to determine, you know, to lighten or deepen any shade. But every colour comes from these, which are called the primary colours. So if you mix two primaries together, you get a secondary colour, which I will show you. So yellow and blue, mix that together and you will get you see green. Okay, if you mix your blue and red, you will get a purple shade. And if you mix your yellow and red, you will get, what will you get? Orange. Okay, so now we've got a colour wheel with the primary on and also the secondary in between. So that's our purple, orange and green is in between your yellow, blue and red. So you'll need to look at a colour wheel, so Google one or make your own even better, like draw one out with paints or makeup, however you want to do it. Just as I'm talking, I'm going to just faff with this just to get it to look a bit nicer and blend better. But a colour wheel is a really, really important tool for a makeup artist. I always say for student makeup artists, it's a brilliant idea just to print one out or make one, even a little tiny one, and stick it to your makeup brush belt or something. So you've always got one with you, because there are a number of ways which you will use the colour wheel to help you. So really, really useful for lots of different reasons. The colours on the colour wheel can be divided up into warm, cool and neutral. Now, if you mix every single shade on the colour wheel, so your three primary colours, if I can do it in the middle, I don't know if I can now because I've blended a bit much, probably will. You will get just a neutral colour, all right? So the three primaries mixed together make a neutral, and it usually comes out a bit brownish. My one's going to come out a bit purple because I think I was too heavy-handed on the red when I initially drew it out. But for argument's sake, we'll pretend that that's come out as like a greyish, purplish brown. So equal portions, which is why mine's not come out as neutral as it should do. Equal portions of three primary colours gives you a neutral. And then the colours on the colour wheel are divided, other than that, into hot and cold colours. Your cold colours are your sort of blues, purples and greens, and your hot colours are your reds, oranges and yellows. So yeah, just handy to know the colour temperatures. So one of the things that we use a lot on the colour wheel are complementary colours. And those are colours that are opposite each other on the colour wheel. If you look opposite to blue is orange, that's a complementary colour. So blue and orange complement each other. Opposite to purple is your yellow, and opposite to red is your green. So your complementary colours are a primary and a secondary that are opposite, sit directly opposite each other on the colour wheel. And complementary colours, if they're placed next to each other, they will enhance each other. So the green will look greener and the red will look redder. They look fantastic sitting next to each other. But because you've got a secondary colour and a primary colour, you can't mix red and green together, because what you're doing in effect is you're mixing, if you mix red and green, green is made up of yellow and blue, so you are therefore mixing all of the colours and you're going to get a neutral brown, which is why if you try and blend green into red, it just comes out a bit brownish and dull and kind of what we'd say is muddy. So some colours will blend beautifully into each other and others won't. So your complementary colours are opposites on the colour wheel. If you Google a colour wheel or copy one out, those colours are always in the same order and the same layout on any colour wheel. And just remember that opposites look great side by side, blend them together and they look a bit of a mush. They don't work as well. So as well as your complementary colours, which are your opposites, you also have harmonising colours. These are your next door neighbours. So harmonising colours side by side on the colour wheel blend beautifully together and are really, really helpful for choosing colours to do to blend into each other for makeup. In terms of choosing what colours to put on a client, I firmly believe that anybody can wear any colour eyeshadow really. It's more about the tone and whether it's a warm or cool tone. But the main rule of thumb I always think is don't match the eye colour exactly. So if your client's got green eyes, lucky them, but they could still wear green eyeshadow. But if they've got like a real deep emerald green eye, give them either a deeper or a more khaki green, so it's like a harmonising green. Don't match the colour of the eye exactly. Same with blue eyes, but you know, if they've got bright blue eyes, they can look great with a navy blue eyeshadow. So just don't match it exactly. And with brown eyes, you're really lucky because every colour looks fantastic on brown eyes. So you could wear all the colours of the rainbow. Whatever colour you choose is always going to be contrast to a brown eye, unless you're going for browns and neutrals, in which case the same goes. So don't match the eye colour exactly. So just make sure you're always contrasting with the eye colour. But if you really want to bring out the the client's eyes and really make them shine out and make them pop, then think about your colour theory and your complementary colours. So for example, blue and orange are complementary colours. If your client's got blue eyes, then anything orange is going to look amazing on them. It doesn't mean to say you've got to take it literally and just use orange as an eyeshadow. That would look obviously fantastic, but it's not necessarily what everyone wants every time. So choose browns that have got a little bit of orange in them, or you could go with coppery shades or a more goldeny shade. But just warmer colours that will be opposite on the colour wheel. So think about orange as your main base for colours to choose, but then, you know, tailor it to the sort of look that you're trying to do. They might not even want much eyeshadow on. If someone's got green eyes, they want quite a neutral eyeshadow. If you give them a red lip, that's going to do the same thing. So the red on the lips is going to enhance the green in the eyes. So opposites are always really, really useful for flattering the client's eye colour. And then your harmonising colours, again, you could go for a harmonising colour that's going to blend with the eye colour. So for example, blue eyes could look equally lovely with purpley shades on. So it's just always using this colour wheel as a reference for, you know, what's going to work. The other thing with your colour wheel is, so you have all of your, these are called the hue, which is the name of the colour. So red, orange, yellow, that's the hue. And then of course you can lighten them or deepen them, so with tint or shade. So to change the tint of a colour from red into pink, you quite obviously, you would add a white, and that will give you different tints of red. To deepen it can be a little bit more complicated. Yes, you can add black to deepen a colour, but you just have to be really, really careful of using black in makeup, as it's a very cold, flat base, and it sometimes can come off a little bit harsh or a little bit dull. Sometimes it can look a bit ashy. So sometimes think about deepening your shades with a little bit of maybe the opposite colour on top. That will deepen it. But of course, if you want a really, really deep red, like a maroon or a burgundy, you'll put a tiny little speck of black in. All right, so your black and your white can sort of move the hue up and down the shade accordingly. The other thing that is useful, the colour wheel helps us with, is colour correction. Now, I'm a little bit of a mind that actually colour correction, yes, it will always work and I would never dispute it, but majority of the time nowadays, where you're working with such good quality coverage foundations and concealers, that actually colour correction in itself is not always necessary. And I always think you're better off to keep the skin coverage as light as you can get away with, rather than overloading it with loads of different steps and loads of different products as well. So I just like to keep things to a minimum wherever possible. However, colour theory and colour correction is very relevant and very true, and it always will work. So your complementary colours, as well as working side by side, they'll enhance each other. If you put them on top of each other, they will cancel each other out. So they will make, you know, if you've got too much redness in the skin and you add some green to your base, that's going to cancel out the redness. A useful colour for colour correcting is orange and peach. Those are nice for underneath the eye circles. So if someone's got really dark under eye, I find you're better off to, I'm going to start smudging my colour wheel now. I find you're better off to warm up the under eye shadow first before you just go over it with a light. If you go over it with a light straight away without colour correcting first, it will start to look a bit, oh, so annoying, my video cut off then. I was saying about colour correcting under the eye. So if you don't warm it up, it will start to look a bit greyish and can even highlight and draw attention to the problem. So you always want to look at the undertone from under the skin. So if it's more purpley under there, then look for your opposite of purple, which is going to be your yellowy tone. If it's more bluey under there in undertone, then you're going to go opposite to blue, which is your orange. So for lighter skin tones, obviously you wouldn't really put a pure orange there. You'd go, you know, you can tint your orange to make it more of a peachy tone. So colour correcting, I think, yes, you need to know the theory of it and it will always work. Not always relevant, especially if you're doing like a full glam client with a real heavy coverage foundation. You just don't need to colour correct first. Where it can be useful is if you're doing like a photographic makeup and you want the skin a bit lighter. If you just use a very, very light amount of colour corrector on the areas, whether it's redness, whether it's under the eyes, and buff it with something like a dry, like eyeshadow brush, like this type of thing. So you're just getting a small amount of product on there. Then colour corrector can be really useful, but the less you use the better. If you use a heavy amount of green, you're then giving yourself a new problem to solve, which is getting rid of all the green. So tiny bit is all that's needed for colour correcting. Excuse me. And another thing why the colour wheel is useful for makeup artists is whether clients suit warm colours or cool colours. And that's a whole huge topic in itself. And I don't really think that you need to be able to diagnose someone and say, oh, you're cool, you're warm. Usually you can tell by when you're applying the makeup, it just doesn't always sit right on the skin. So if they're a bit too cool tone, you can use warm on them. It can just not, it just doesn't flow like the makeup looks like it's wearing the client rather than the client wearing the makeup. So keep things, you know, to the right tone, but just use your eye rather than having necessarily to label they're this, they're that. So if we look at, this is a contour palette actually, but I do use this as an eyeshadow palette quite often. Some of the colours on here, hopefully this comes off all right on camera. Like these I would say are quite cool tone. That one's kind of quite neutral I would say, and that one's definitely warm, and that one's quite cool. But look at your palettes and see if you can sort of ascertain which one's warm and cool. And the other thing that I like about colour theory is it works with eyeshadow. So if we take a swatch of one of these, let's go for this one, which is warm. Hopefully you can see. So there's our warm tone eyeshadow. Let's say you've put that on a client and you're thinking actually this needs to cool down a little bit. You can literally choose a little bit of a blue, which is going to cool it down. So adding blue, which is a cool tone colour, is going to cool down your colour. So if you mix a little bit of blue in with it, into your shadow, you can see it still looks like a brown. We're not changing it to blue. I know this just looks like I've given myself a horrendous bruise, but hopefully you get the idea. And then a bit more of that original shadow can move in, so I can kind of sandwich those colours in together. And let's just put the original one next to it. You've got two different shades, so they're both brown. This one's warm, this one's cool. I'm not suggesting that in your daily makeup that you start fiddling about with primary colours in eyeshadow, but it's a useful trick. If you've gone too far and you think, oh, this is coming off too warm, add a little speck at a time of blue and it can save you. And the other way is true as well. So if you go too cool and you need to warm up, add a tiny little bit of red, and that is gonna, you know, help warm it up as well. So warm and cool are useful to know, in fact very important to know, but it's one of those things that takes a lot of practice to be able to, you know, notice which people are, because often people are neutral, or they sometimes are cool, sometimes are warm. A good way to tell is if people like to wear silver jewellery. I'm not helping because I'm wearing both. Silver jewellery or gold jewellery. So often people will know the sorts of colours that they tend to go for, and that can give you a good indication. Excuse the background noise, it started raining and it makes it really loud on the roof where I am. I've got a couple of really good books that go into colour theory for makeup. This is an excellent book for any makeup students. This is the Makeup Artist Handbook by Gretchen Davis and Mindy Hall. Fantastic one, and it's got really good chapters on colour theory. So we could go on and on all day, but I'm not. I'm just telling you kind of what you need to know. This one's also a nice book, really much more in-depth colour theory for the makeup artist. Goes into lighting, skin tones, a lot more depth if you want to look into it. But really what you need to know as a makeup artist is your colour wheel, your primary colours, your secondary colours, what colours are warm and what colours are cool. And as I say, your complementary colours are great to use to enhance each other, great also to cancel each other out. So when you're thinking about doing, maybe you want to do a colourful makeup look, or you want to do something creative, avant-garde, or even just on a client, they might want some bright colour, always refer back to your colour wheel. It will help you choose which colours will blend into each other. So you won't get red and green to blend nicely, you'll just get a mush like we've got in the middle. But you will be able to use red and green on a makeup look if you went red through orange, then yellow, then into green. Or if you went red through purple, through blue, and then into green. So there are ways around using those colours together nicely. And it all comes down to knowing your colour wheel. Okay, thank you for watching. I hope that was helpful. And I will see you next time. Take care.